Why did the gods decide to erase paradise from the map? You've been sold a lie about the lost city of Atlantis. You probably picture mermaids, glowing crystals, and a peaceful utopia sinking tragically into the ocean. Maybe you think of Aquaman or that Disney movie. But the actual story, the one written by the guy who invented the myth in the first place, is infinitely darker. Atlantis wasn't a paradise, it was a warning. It was a military dictatorship built on blood, purity, and conquest that got so twisted the gods had to hit the reset button on the entire world just to stop them. And the scariest part? It was all Poseidon's fault. See, usually when we talk about Poseidon, we think of the trident, the beard, maybe his beef with Odysseus. But in the story of Atlantis, we see a version of the sea god that's honestly kind of terrifying. This isn't the cool uncle of the Olympians. This is a jealous, possessive landlord who created an entire civilization just to hide a secret affair. Let's strip away the Hollywood glitter and look at the original text from Plato. Because that's where the real horror story is hiding. It starts with a girl named Cleito. According to the myth, back when the gods were dividing up the earth, Poseidon snagged a massive island beyond the Pillars of Hercules. That's basically the Strait of Gibraltar today. On this island, he found a mortal woman, Cleito, and he wanted her, badly. But he didn't just court her, he isolated her. Poseidon broke the ground itself to keep her away from everyone else. He carved out massive concentric rings of water and land around the hill she lived on. Think about that visual for a second. He literally reshaped the geography of an island to create a prison of water, making it impossible for anyone to get to her, or for her to leave. That's the foundation of Atlantis. It wasn't built as a thriving trade hub, it started as a gilded cage for a god's lover. They had 5 sets of twin boys. The oldest was Atlas, not the guy holding up the sky, a different Atlas. And these 10 sons became the kings of Atlantis. This is where the utopia idea comes from, because for a while, things were good. Almost too good. The description of the city is actually insane. Plato describes walls plated in brass, tin, and this red metal called Orichalcum that glowed like fire. They had hot and cold running water, massive bathhouses, and temples filled with statues of gold. But it wasn't just gold and marble. The island was crawling with elephants. Yeah, elephants. And the soil was so rich you could throw a seed on the ground and it would grow a feast. It sounds perfect, right? But there was a rot at the center of it. See, the laws of Atlantis were written by Poseidon himself, and they were brutal. The 10 kings had absolute power, but they were bound by this blood oath to the sea god. Every few years, the kings would gather in the temple of Poseidon at night, and this is the part the cartoons definitely skip. They didn't just pray, they hunted. They would let a bull loose inside the sacred precinct. The 10 kings, alone in the dark with no weapons, just clubs and nooses, had to hunt this bull down and capture it alive. Once they caught it, they dragged it to a pillar of Orichalcum inscribed with Poseidon's laws. They slit the bull's throat over the pillar so its blood ran down over the writing. Then they'd mix the blood with wine in a golden bowl, pour some into the fire, and drink the rest. It was a blood pact, a ritual to keep the divine bloodline pure. And that's where the revelation really hits, because Atlantis worked until the biology kicked in. For generations, the Atlanteans were more god than human. They were virtuous, they didn't care about gold, they were chill. But over centuries, Poseidon's divine DNA got diluted. The mortals kept marrying mortals. The god part faded, and the human part took over. And according to the Greeks, the human part is where the greed, ego, and violence come from. This is the turning point. This is when the paradise became the evil empire. Atlantis didn't just sit there enjoying their hot springs. They mobilized. They built a massive navy, 1,200 ships. They had 10,000 chariots. And they decided that having the best island wasn't enough. They wanted the whole world. They launched a massive invasion of the Mediterranean. They swept through North Africa. They took over parts of Italy. They were enslaving everyone they conquered. This wasn't a peaceful exploration. It was a world war. And who stood against them? This is the wildest part of Plato's story that nobody talks about. The only ones who could stop the Atlantean war machine were the Athenians. Ancient Athens, way before the time of Socrates, stood alone against this massive superpower. It's this classic David versus Goliath story. The Atlanteans had the tech, the numbers, and the Orichalcum armor, but the Athenians managed to drive them back and liberate the enslaved nations. So Atlantis lost the war. They were humiliated. But the punishment didn't come from Athens. It came from Olympus. Zeus was watching all of this. He saw this race of people who used to be honorable sinking into arrogance and greed. They had all the gifts of Poseidon, but they were using them to crush the weak. Zeus decided enough was enough. He called a meeting of all the gods in his most honorable residence. He pointed down at the corruption of Atlantis and basically said, "We need to fix this." Now, Plato's text actually cuts off right there. It's one of history's biggest cliffhangers. But we know what happened next from the other summaries. It wasn't a slow decline. It happened in a single day and night of misfortune. Poseidon, the very god who founded the city, who loved it, who built those rings of water, he had to be the executioner. Because who else controls the earthquakes and the floods? The ground began to shake. Violent tremors cracked the foundation of the royal palace. The Orichalcum walls buckled. And then the ocean, Poseidon's domain, came rushing in. It wasn't a gentle sinking. It was a violent swallowing. The mud churned up, the beautiful temples shattered, and the millions of people, the soldiers, the kings, the elephants, were dragged into the dark. The island didn't just vanish. It left behind a massive shoal of impassable mud, making the ocean unnavigable for centuries. So why does this matter? Why are we still obsessed with this story thousands of years later? Because we want to believe in the magic city. We want to believe there's a secret paradise hiding under the waves where everything is perfect. But the truth about Poseidon and Atlantis isn't about a hidden paradise. It's about power. It's a story about how even the most perfect society, built by the gods themselves, can rot from the inside out if it loses its moral compass. Poseidon didn't create a utopia that was too beautiful for this world. He created a monster that had to be put down. But it makes you wonder, if Atlantis really was this advanced, aggressive empire that almost conquered the world, would we actually want to find them? Or are some things better left at the bottom of the ocean? What do you think? Was Atlantis a real place that got wiped out, or just a spooky campfire story Plato made up to scare his students? Let me know in the comments.